Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique 2-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features draft a team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, welcome to this Thursday night edition of Mrs. R Relevant. I am joined today with Sam, Owen, and Newt, and it's good to see you guys.
Yeah, it's fun to be here.
Good to see you, Jim. Thanks for having us all back on.
Yeah, it's great to be back. I missed last week. I had to sit there and listen to Newt slander me on an Ohio State podcast, and then turn around on Friday and draft Tyler Booker over Donovan Jackson and pretend like that didn't happen.
Oh man, I wanted to slander you to your face. Like I wanted to throw you under the bus with Heather there. And then you chickened out on me. So like, I don't know who's complaining here.
Yeah, I go ahead, Jim.
Oh, I was going to say it must have been the laryngitis from the Royal Rumble. He must have been cheering really hard when he was in Indy.
I did have a hoarse voice the day after. It was like right after I met up with Jim. I was driving home. I'm like, oh, I'm glad I don't have anyone to talk to outside of like my brother-in-law who was driving with me, because like I was barely able to speak. If I had to do a podcast that day, I'd been cooked. But then after that, I think I got something. There was just so many people down there. I was interacting with so many different people. I got back and I got so sick it ended up forcing me. I'm not a big tea guy, but I've been forced into suffering through it and drinking some just because my throat was just killing me. I was knocked on my butt for like almost a week.
Oh man.
And Sam, I think this is your third or fourth podcast with us, so welcome back. You are much appreciated to come back, so thank you.
No, of course. I love ranking shows. I'm happy to be here.
Cool. So James Foster had said that he was going to be here, so his board is the one that is on the far left. What we're going to do is, if I remembered this correctly, Newt's board is the second one, Sam's board is the third one, and then Owen's board is the fourth one to the far right. So each person's going to kind of go through their number one guy, and then when it gets to Owen on the far side, he'll talk about his number two, and it'll kind of snake back around. So, Owen, who is your cornerback one, and what do you like about Will Johnson?
Yeah, so I have Will Johnson right now.
I was looking at Newt, and I said Owen, and I've done that all the time.
Oh, that's good stuff.
It's like, can't you see who I'm looking at? I'm looking at you right through the computer screen. So I meant to say, Newt, you have Will Johnson number one. What do you like about Will Johnson? And wow.
No worries. So yeah, I'm the outlier here. Everyone else has Travis Hunter number one. And like, I'm not going to push back on that at all. When I look at Will Johnson, there's a couple of things that really strike me about him. He is going to be someone that is, in my opinion, built for the position. You look at his frame and everything that he brings, 6'2", 200 pounds. I love that. I love some length from a cornerback, especially a guy that you're looking for in the top of this class. You want some length to play outside cornerback. I think that if you take a look at him, you can tell he's well coached. You can obviously tell that he's part of a big-time program in Michigan because he's getting really, really good coaching. His technique, in my opinion, is second to none. I've loved his instincts on top of that. And that's going to be some of the things that really drive him up the board for me. This year, obviously, has been a little bit of a setback for him, given the injuries that he's had. It's a couple of them throughout. I think turf toe and then a shoulder injury that have plagued him. But if you look at, where he's been this year, playing with those nagging injuries, and then you look at what he did last year, he has been an electric player. He's a guy that I'd be willing to bet on, especially given what he was able to do this year with those injuries. Looking at the tape, he's able to be extremely sticky in coverage. He's able to mirror receivers really, really well. I do not worry about him with man. I think he can play, press coverage really, really well. Maybe not the best at that man coverage. I think Hunter's going to take him a little bit of an edge there, but also it comes into some of the athleticism that Hunter brings to the position. I think Will Johnson's maybe a little bit he's not unathletic, but he's not like the stellar athlete that Travis Hunter is. But I think his instincts and just the technical pieces that he has of the game are going to be a little bit what push him above Travis Hunter for me. On my big board, I have Travis Hunter above Will Johnson. And if I look at my cornerback board, obviously I have Will Johnson number 1, but it's a razor thin margin. I know there's been some questions about Will Johnson's long speed. I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue, but that obviously could be something if you look at combine and some of the elements that come there, that if it gets to be like that 4.6 number, then maybe some conversations. I don't think it'll be there. I think he's going to test out fairly well, and it's going to be a really good display of why he's going to be one of the top ranked cornerbacks. So Will Johnson, number 1 for me. Really, really like the player. I think he warranted all the hype going into the season. Obviously not the season he wanted, but still an electric prospect and one that I expect to be a top 10 pick in this year's draft.
And Sam, you have Travis Hunter at number 1.
Yeah, I don't have Will Johnson up there. I got Will Johnson in the same tier. I have a first-round grade on him. I don't have a lot of first-round grades this year. I've gotten like 8 or 9. It's a really thin group at the top. So I have a lot of respect for Will Johnson. I just think maybe he's a little bit less scheme diverse than you do, Newt. I prefer more operating zones. There's some issues I've had with his hand placement and press coverage, and occasionally being caught flat-footed in man a little bit that I would like to see him iron out. Those are fixable things, certainly, but as of right now, I just lean a little bit more towards Travis Hunter when we're splitting hairs like this because of Hunter's extreme level of fluidity, movement skills. I like Hunter as a receiver too, but I think the build itself plays a lot to playing cornerback. And of course, talk about the instincts, the ability to jump routes, to be able to make transitions from zone coverage where you got your eyes on the quarterback, you're watching plays unfold, and being able to see some window dressing on some routes, to be able to see through route concepts, make quick decisions, and then break on the ball and make the plays he does with his body control, his ball skills, but also that closing burst and just elite overall fluidity and athleticism really sets him apart from me in this class. Because while Will Johnson certainly has the size advantage in this situation, a player like Travis Hunter has the ability to be a true lockdown player and maybe a scheme diverse player because of his ability to play man coverage and be able to recover quickly, have that quick twitch ability, and all those traits you love to see in guys who play much closer to the line of scrimmage. I think Will Johnson will at the next level.
And Owen, you have Travis Hunter as your top corner.
So actually,
Hey James, good to see you.
Nice.
I think it might have gotten flipped. I don't know if it was when I sent over to you, Jim, or not, but I actually have Will Johnson ahead of Travis Hunter slightly at corner here.
Let's go!
Okay.
We finally agree on something. 3 months in.
Yeah, blame the admin on that one.
I do agree with what Sam said about Travis Hunter, about how he is overall this elite athlete that is able to kind of channel it into being a corner. And I'm also there with a new where it comes with Will Johnson. Technically, I really do think he excels. I don't think he is that big of a fall off between Travis Hunter and Will Johnson. He's obviously not as good of an athlete as Travis Hunter is. But I do think with me, Will Johnson has the intelligence and the technique to play kind of the zone coverages, playing some of these more advanced things, read the quarterback's eyes, and be able to make plays on the ball. But he also has some athleticism that shows up that allows you to think that he can be someone who excels in man. So while I do think Will Johnson is a more finished product right now and is going to be a better cornerback like day one than Travis Hunter is, I think because he was asked to spread so much time between being a receiver and between being a corner, I think Travis Hunter will eventually become the better player. Personally, and I've had this take for a bit now since watching both of his sides of his ball of film. I think the split play for Travis Hunter, it negatively impacted him more as a corner than a receiver, where receiver, he was able to show some of the stuff that he understands how corners work, how different technique and coverages work when he going against corners that he could utilize and exploit as a receiver. Whereas at corner, there was some technique stuff that I think he can clean up that he just wasn't asked to or wasn't really focused on in practice because he was so busy trying to learn both sides of the ball. So that kind of held him back a bit as a corner, more so than it is a wide receiver. But he still excels in both. So I'm not really going to say he's anything other than my number one overall player in this class, personally.
Oh, and I really like that because like that's a conversation that I've heard a couple different places. I heard like Connor Rogers bringing out an NFL SE, just like, was it detrimental that he played both sides? I think there's like pros and cons to both, but I think it's definitely like something to bring up with Travis Hunter. So I absolutely love that call out.
So James, your number one corner is Travis Hunter. Do you want to talk about your number one and your number two corners?
Yeah, so I don't know how much you guys have already talked about Travis Hunter so far, but I mean, I really view Hunter as kind of the complete prototypical zone cornerback, just in terms of athleticism and skill set. Really checks every box. Like I've never seen a corner that plays the flats and shallow zones with the instincts that he does and the route recognition. I mean, there's a play that still sticks out to me from last year against Arizona where it's in the red zone and he reads kind of like a deep over drag route that's coming from the opposite side of the field and just kind of like bounces in between zones. And he's got the short area burst and like the stride length to where he can really close space in short areas quickly, and it allows him to impact multiple routes kind of within the same area really quickly. He's got the length and the ball skills and the explosiveness to where he can get into passing lanes and, really generate turnovers. So heading into the year, I felt a lot of that about Travis Hunter, but thought he was kind of inconsistent in man coverage. And I still worry a little bit about like play strength and dealing with physicality at the break point. He can kind of get allow some separation when he gets pushed off at the top of the route. But I really thought that technically he just took a major step forward this year and press man, was so much more patient with his footwork. And like, I thought last year he kind of just created a lot of issues for himself with like jittery footwork or just erratic technique. And he was a lot more composed this year. And like, he's got the fluidity and change of direction skills to be really good in man coverage. So outside of size, I really like everything about Travis Hunter as a corner. And he's my number two player to Abdul Carter overall. And then my number two corner is Azariah Thomas, who I think like he's a guy that I've been a fan of since I first watched his tape back in October, I think. And I just think he's one of the most underrated players in this class. The blend of size, length, being able to mirror and being that fluid at his size, and then checks the speed box, checks the explosiveness box. I probably wouldn't want him in like a quarters scheme, but if you're playing press man cover 3, I think that he's kind of a prototypical guy in this class. Doesn't have the interception production, but just really didn't get targeted that much and didn't have a lot of opportunities. He was really just kind of pressing guys to the sideline, and they were throwing the ball to the other side of the field. So I'm a big fan of Thomas.
And then, James, why do you have Thomas over Will Johnson? What is it about one that makes you like them better than the other? Or
so it's probably a bit of a combination of me being higher on Thomas and lower on Johnson than most people. I think that, Will Johnson, his tape, like dating back to this summer, has never really lived up to the way that a lot of other people seem to view him. I think that, when I first watched him this summer, I saw the Washington game where he was getting beat over the top by Rome Odunze. Watch the Bama game where it was mostly just zone coverage. Go to Ohio State. He's got the interception, but then he got beat vertically by Marvin Harrison Jr. a couple times. I thought the Purdue game was really impressive. But then, like Maryland, he's getting beat by Caden Prather and Ty Felton. So there were a lot of stuff on tape last year. It's not just the injury for me. A lot of stuff on tape last year that made me really question his speed. And I still love him in zone coverage, but I was kind of worried that he's like a scheme limited player. And then this year just really didn't do anything to answer any of my questions and kind of confirmed most of my concerns, like just with the over aggressiveness against double moves that I think is just kind of an inappropriate way for him to be playing, given the fact that he doesn't have that elite recovery speed. Really worried me. And like you saw that show up against Fresno State, you saw it show up against Washington. And also just at his size, expected him to be a lot better against the run and a lot more consistent of a tackler, and didn't see that on tape, especially this year.
Okay. Newt, you want to go over your second and third corners?
Yeah, so I got to say this too. Like, man, I went into this exercise because we didn't swap any boards or anything like that. And I was like, oh, man, I think I might have Azariah Thomas as kind of like that sneaky guy. And then, like, I'm literally the lowest guy on him on this whole list. And now I feel like an absolute douchebag. Like, oh, way to, like, sleep on this guy. After, like, James has him number 2. And I'm just like, oh, man. Now I feel like just, like, the guy I was super excited to talk about, it's like, oh, no, you're not up on the hype train yet.
I go out and monitor everybody's big boards and make sure that I'm at all times the highest person on Azariah Thomas.
I'm going to mention him really quick because obviously I don't have anything to contribute because everyone else has so many better things to say about him. I loved Azariah Thomas. I think you can see his size on tape. Like he steps up in press coverage. You're like, holy shit, that looks like a trim defensive end, like a slender defensive end, like with his shoulder pads and like how thick he is across the top. And he just looks like he's about to like knock the hell out of someone every time he steps up to press. So like, love the guy there. Obviously, I have to go back and do some work and get him ahead of James. And now Bill, who's got him number 8. I'm just gonna put him number 1 on my big board and just end it with that. So I can be on top of the train. But like James, love everything you said about him. Really, really like the guy. I thought he's a great cornerback. I don't need to talk on Travis Hunter anymore. I think it's been said really, really well. Let me hop down to Benjamin Morrison. I really like Benjamin Morrison. And for anyone that doesn't know out there, there's a huge like kind of cloud of haze around him with his hip injury that I think is going to be like make or break for him. When I'm evaluating Benjamin Morrison, I'm evaluating him in the sense that I think he's going to be medically cleared and ready to go for the NFL draft. Now, obviously, if he's not, he's going to change a lot in terms of where I think he is, and he's probably going to drop way, way down there, and maybe even out of my draftable range if it's going to be something that's long-term because not that, everything on the internet is truth, but obviously there's some things that have been said where like a hip injury of that kind can be something that's really, really detrimental. So I think there's a lot that goes into that. Aside from that, though, Benjamin Morrison as a prospect, if you take the injury aside that he had this year that really, really hampered him, I love his anticipation. I think he had even better than Will Johnson. I talked about that with him. The reason that set him apart for Travis Hunter with me was his like anticipation and the way that he had kind of a knack for the ball. I think Benjamin Morrison does that and even a little bit more. He's an extremely physical player, which for me, if you're going to have a high motor and you're going to get out there and you get after it, I love that. So for Benjamin Morrison, I think that was really, really great there to see. I think he plays good in single coverage. And I think if you're looking at a cornerback in today's NFL, you want to be able to have a guy that you can just get out there, put against wide receiver 1 and almost forget him. And obviously, if you're going up against a Jamar Chase or against a Justin Jefferson, that situation changes a little bit. But if you can have that guy where you're like, hey, just take care of business and get the job done, it is life-changing. And I think Benjamin Morrison does give you that opportunity. Some things that you take a look and like kind of go against him a little bit. Like he does have a little bit of a slender build. I think his physicality makes up for that to a degree, but you take a step to the NFL and that's going to show up more and more. So I think he does need to put some weight on at 6 feet, 190. He's a little bit undersized as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that 190 is quite where it is. I think he's a little bit less than that. I think that's Notre Dame kind of fudging some things. He can be overly grabby. I'm not terribly concerned about that. I was really high on Joey Porter Jr., and that was a really big knock on him was his physicality. I like that, to tell you the truth. I think it's a guy that I'd rather tell him to kind of pull it back than, press the gas a little bit more. But it is obviously something that if you can't change that is going to be a little bit of a factor. And then he's another guy with his long speed that I do have a little bit of question around, just like I have with Will Johnson. If, you take a look at the combine numbers and it's not where it needs to be, that does raise some red flags for me. But I think he's a true boundary cornerback that can be an impactful player at the next level. I think throughout this entire, pre-draft process, he's getting slept on a little bit. I do understand that like a lot of things are going to come out in regards to him with that injury, but if he's ready to go, he's easily a first-round talent for me and a guy that I really, really like looking forward to next year.
So Newt, I liked him a lot in the summer. I had a pretty high grade on him then, but I do think the tape this year is a little bit flawed because he hasn't really been healthy since the end of last year. I mean, he had shoulder surgery in March, missed spring training camp, so he's been hurt the entire time. But he had a hip injury in high school. That was a problem for him, and now has another hip injury again. And even he's healthy enough to compete at the combine, I am a little bit worried. Like I still have corner 5 right now, so it's not like I'm bailing on him. But if I am a GM and I'm drafting for my job, I'm probably putting him in the do not draft category because I'm probably worried about. Yeah, I'm probably.
That's totally fair. Like I completely understand that regard with that. Like, and that's kind of like I'm trying to talk about it as a prospect, but like obviously that needs to be said. I'm glad you brought it up, Sam.
Yeah, I have conversations every now and then. I brought it to one of my friends the other day. Like I am a little worried that if he does compete at the combine, which I don't think he will, but if he does, I'm a little worried he will Kalen King himself a little bit in terms of like if he doesn't run well and he's going to come in with short arms and he come in a little undersized, you're going to get 10 percentile or lower in a lot of areas potentially for him as an athlete, and that could be really detrimental to a player who has an injury history. So that's where I come in really worried about Morrison. The tape in 2023 I really did enjoy. The tape this year is good, but not to the level it was in 2023. So there's enough red flags here where you can really justify moving him all around the board, I think.
Yep.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
Sam, you want to go through your 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, I can go ahead and do that right now. So I talked about Will Johnson a little bit, so I'm not going to go too far into him. With AZ, I mean, James did a really good job highlighting him. Jameson brought him up initially to me, I think, in a Twitter thread back in October or so. You're like, did you watch him yet? I'm like, no, I hadn't watched him yet. You were the second person to ask him about him. So I went ahead and put the tape on, and he's just a tremendous player overall. I do think that the biggest concern I have for him is sometimes the inconsistencies in run defense. The Duke game in particular, he has 2 or 3, maybe even 4 missed tackles in open space you have to work on there. For a player with his size, you'd hope to get a little bit more out of him in that area. But I think you even watch like the Clemson game, I thought was really good in coverage. Overall, I think they don't target him because there were so many flaws in that Florida State defense that you just ignore him and you're pretty much set up with your own offense. But overall, like a tremendous athlete for his size. You do have some leggy transitions in coverage when you're near the line of scrimmage, but at the size, you kind of understand that. There will be some instances where he gets a little grabby, but overall, I'm willing to live with that considering the size and athletic profile he has, with mostly fluid hips at his size to mirror releases near the line of scrimmage. You just don't get that from guys with this type of build and arm length very often. And even going back to like his performance at the Senior Bowl this year, he's got a couple of really nice plays in the one-on-one, especially on the go, like working vertical routes, which, you're in vertical routes, a play like him should win, but he has that one-armed interception in the corner of the end zone. It's really sweet to see that. It doesn't really mean much because it's like these one-on-ones that don't really translate, but hey, I'm happy anytime we can give him a little bit of pub online. But really good reflexes overall, and just a tremendous athlete of size with really controlled footwork to throttle up and throttle down to maintain that connection there and not allow separation at the top of the stem. And of course, the physicality to reroute receivers. So I'm super high on him. He's a top 15 player for me coming up. So I have a round 2 grade on him. But that's just because I'm not super high in this class, but he's a really high player on my board overall. whenever I finally get to publish the update, which could be hopefully sometime this month. Ravel at 4. The ACL is really a bummer in this situation because it doesn't give us a lot to work with based off of the season. I'm willing to bet on some of the athletic traits. I know there's a little bit of question in terms of the vertical speed there, but I think he has some other traits to get him out there. I like the hips right now. I think that's mostly smooth. A good combination of size and length. The speed is good enough, but not elite to work with right now. He's got good physicality near the line of scrimmage. I think pretty poised footwork and some nice patience at the line. He's able to read out receivers into the sideline. Good sudden quick transition from his half turn. And overall quick feet at the top of the stem, slow down, decelerate, and maintain sticky coverage on comebacks and curls. He's a really aggressive player to allow minimal separation. He's a player who will read the quarterback's eyes to try to play and maybe jump routes as well. I do like having that aggression. I understand that can bite corners every now and then, but I'm a guy who's I'm willing to bet on some level of that aggression. I want guys who are able to go out there, be playmakers, and create turnovers. And then overall, I like what he does in zone in terms of being able to transition between some shallower routes, but then also being able to locate and understand and have the awareness that there are deeper routes developed behind him to when he needs to make a transition or maybe bail out a little bit to have guys behind him. He's really good at the catch point with a great vertical. He's really good at boxing receivers out. He's got a large catch radius overall. Really, I would have liked to seen him clean some stuff up in press coverage because he's not a twitchy guy, so he has to land his punches pretty consistently near the line of scrimmage. He's a little high cut too, which contributes to some leggier transitions out of press. He does have moments where he whiffs. In those situations, again, doesn't have that elite downfield speed to really recover, and that leads to him being stacked. So I think he needs to be a little bit tighter up with his punches, maybe a little bit more focused on using independent hands as opposed to trying to do two-hand punches that may put him off balance in bad situations. And there are times where he's grabby and fights a lot with his hands downfield that I think will draw flags in the NFL. You just have to clean that up a little bit. So there's some limitations in terms of the downfield speed, but overall, I'm open to playing him in a variety of coverages because of what he brings to the table. And then if you see he's not really a fit for what you want to do, I think you can work off of that. Right now, I want to give him opportunities in press coverage based on that length and size. Is there a chance he might struggle there long-term? Potentially, but I want to give him those moments because of the size he has.
So, Owen, you want to cover your 4 through 7, making sure that you highlight that you are the highest on Jahdae Barron and you are one of the highest on Trey Amos.
Whoa. Me and Owen have Trey Amos and Jahdae Barron at the exact same spot. I want to highlight that really quick before any slanders brought my way.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Newt. Do you want to be slandered?
Highest, but fair enough.
I'm here to accept it at least, not like you last week.
Well,
you're right. I should have came on here and without speaking of word, just took it on a Emeka Egbuka slander. But yeah, so for me, we kind of touched on the guys previous. So you which number you said started number 4, Jahdae Barron?
Jahdae Barron. I mean, cover your 4 through 7, but Jahdae Barron and Trey Amos probably deserve a lot of airtime right now. Because you're going to be
so Jahdae Barron,
you and Newt are higher on both of them than the consensus of the 4 of you.
Yeah. So for Barron, I'm the one who's higher on him. Newt, just want to make that clear. But for Barron, for me, he's someone who I came into. I heard a lot about him leading into the watch session for him. Just from some of the guys I've been working with, and they are getting into their film watching as well in their free time. And I did like a lot of what I saw. I didn't think that his lack of overall size really bothered me as much. I felt he was able to kind of play through some of that, especially with, I know he's 5'11", 200. He's kind of built more thick. So I'm not really too concerned about that. He did play with some good physicality, both in route and when coming up to defend the run. I personally thought he was very smart when it came to zone coverages, being able to work off quarterback's eyes, and then coming up and being able to come down on routes that he has developing in front of him. Outside of that, I think what made me hold back and not have him a little bit higher for me is I didn't love his instincts when it came to back to the quarterback man coverage, where he's able to work off the wide receiver and trying to play from where they're setting him up. And that kind of played a little more into some of the ball skills, things I didn't like. I didn't love how his ball skills when transitioning from not being eyes on the quarterback, seeing that release point, to when he's in man, he's facing away and he has to kind of read the receiver's eyes and be able to turn and react to that. I felt like there was some drop off from there. So that's kind of the areas where I felt he needed to improve the most. I do think he has some good athleticism that makes him worthy of being like a man coverage corner and won't struggle there specifically. I do like him right now as better as a zone guy, but I do see where he can develop more as a man coverage guy. He has the fundamentals there when it comes to athleticism, but I do think he needs to get coached up a bit there. We talked about Benjamin Morrison a little bit. The one thing I want to touch on with him that we didn't really focus a lot on because of the injury history is I wasn't the biggest fan. And now knowing Sam, I didn't know about the shoulder injury coming into the season. That makes a little bit more sense that I wasn't the biggest fan of his run defense and tackling form and being able to just bring guys down. A lot of these guys you see, especially because Morrison's already kind of slender, you see some of these guys are able to come up and attack the run and really make that part of their game, not be a total liability out there, or at least be some kind of positive on the boundary there. Morrison, while he did have some good reps where he was able to take good leverages and not allow for outside contain to be broken, he didn't do a great job with taking on blocks from even like receivers, and when he was coming off to make tackles, it just felt like that wasn't really an element of his game that was going to be something that he could really lean on, and you could look at that and be like, okay, I'm at least neutral there with him out on the boundary. I felt like he was more of a negative there, and that comes into he's already kind of thin. He has some injury histories. He's not the best when it comes to bring some power into that element of his game. So all that stuff wrapped together kind of makes it more of a concern for me there with that specific thing, which I know you're not looking at corners to be run stuffing players, but that's kind of an element you want. You don't want them to be out there and have them actively be picked on in that scenario. So then I have Revel at 6, or Ravel at 6, and I do think I agree with what Sam does. I love him when it comes to someone you allow him to turn and just carry guys vertically up the field. He has the speed, he has the size, the length that he can cover that. Where I think he can improve is there's some plays in zone, especially when he's kind of that lower end in like a cover 2 when he's kind of shallow area, or if he's in a cover 3 and he's being tasked to be more of that middle tier without being the actual deep cover 3 corner. He doesn't get enough depth on occasion, and for sometimes I don't think he really senses the receivers behind him as much as you'd like. So I think he can coach up a bit more in zone and really have the instincts improve there. But other than that, I think that was a pretty good overall summation of him. And then for Trey Amos, he was a guy I didn't think I'd be as high on him. I know Newt had him up pretty high for we have our little list that we did our wide receivers from before, and I'm curious to see what Newt has to say about him. I don't want to talk too much to let Newt have his kind of say there as well. But I did like how he was able to combine kind of that length. He's 6'1", 190. He is on the thinner side, so I didn't love the size when it comes to thickness, but I do think it's not going to hold him back as much as some of the other guys we've seen here. I do like him in man, specifically when it comes to being able to turn and run with guys. I wasn't in love with his change of direction. So for more short area stuff, I think he's more exclusively a boundary guy. So I think with him specifically, he's a little more scheme or a little more positional, locked in to be more of a boundary guy, be more of a man guy with being unable to transition and flip and be able to come down on routes as well when it's off coverage and kind of pushing down and driving on them. So I do like him more as kind of that turn outside boundary man corner. So that's for me with Amos there.
Okay. So James, you are very high on Strong, Parrish, and Porter. You have them at 6, 7, and 8. So you want to talk about them for a little bit?
Yeah. Just a quick note. Agree with everything you guys were saying on Revel. For me, it's just disappointing because I felt like there were like really high end flashes on his tape, and then just points of inconsistency that I wish he could have just put a full season of tape out that really ironed out some of those issues. I don't think he can really afford to not be aggressive with his hands at the line of scrimmage when he's in press man, because there will be times where he's physical, slows down the release, and then just like textbook turning and locating the ball down the sideline, and then other times where he'll allow a clean release to the outside, have a hard time finding the ball and get beat over the top of his head. So just kind of stuff like that. Wish he could have put more of a bigger sample size out there for us. But yeah, I think Strong. I'm surprised that there aren't more people that are this high on him. He really reminds me a lot of Renardo Green from last year as kind of a taller, slender press man corner. Where really my one issue is just play strength and size at the catch point, but I just think he's a really composed, fluid press man corner. He's got really smooth transitions out of press. Really like him in soft shoe press to mirror the release. I think that he has one of the more rare traits for a corner, which is the ability to read the quarterback from a side shuffle and cover 3, but anticipate routes that are developing in his blind spot. Like when you try to attack him with comebacks and stop routes when he's in a side turn, he just has a rare ability to kind of feel those out and stay tight to the top of the route. In press man, I wish that I don't think his punch is as disruptive as it could be, kind of more of a nuisance than a barrier at the line of scrimmage. And I think that at the break point, he can get pushed off and allow some separation to bigger receivers. But I think he's a plug and play, just like him in press man, but can also play zone as well. So I'm a big fan of Dorian Strong. Porter, I actually moved above Parrish. They're 69 and 67 on my board, so pretty much the same grade. Darian Porter out of Iowa State is probably the evaluation, definitely in this cornerback class, but really in the class as a whole, that I just feel the least confident in, because all of my thoughts on him are based on such a small sample size of tape relative to everyone else. Like, I know that he has the size speed combination and checks that box. I know that he can run down the sideline and play the ball like a receiver as a converted receiver. A lot of the other stuff I'm kind of banking on him being good or bad at based on a handful of plays, whereas with other corners, it's based on, stuff that happens snap after snap. Like, I think he has good anticipation and zone IQ, because he's made a couple plays in zone coverage, but it's just a couple of plays that I'm kind of basing that off of. There are times that, I don't think he's going to be this elite mirror corner just at his size. There are times that he actually looks to be able to make like cross-face transitions like at an okay level for such a tall corner. There are other times where he's just kind of clearly outmatched by smaller, slippery receivers. So I wish there were more reps of him trying to mirror guys across the field, because I'm just not sure exactly how scheme limited he is. Like, does he have to be a press cover 3 corner, or can he play more man coverage? And then had some issues late in the season, especially with tackling and run defense. I think it might have been the Arizona State game where he seemed to have a real issue anchoring and kind of like top heavy, just wasn't really competitive engaging with blocks, and got put on his back, and just some slip ups as a tackler. So he's a pure lottery ticket, and an example of a player that I'd like to be able to interview before I confirmed my grade, because I would want to know, why do you have these athletic traits and you weren't able to see the field until you were 23, 24 years old? But I mean, you can't teach his physical traits. So got a top 75 grade on him. And then Jacob Parrish, I just think is extremely solid, like a man coverage slot corner. Doesn't have elite makeup speed. Played on the outside at Kansas State, but I like him in the nickel exclusively in the NFL. I think that he's able to win at the line of scrimmage kind of with both strategies. He can be really aggressive with his 2-hand punch and really reset the line of scrimmage, but can also, has light feet to mirror the release. I think he does a good job of keeping his eyes glued on the receiver's hip throughout the stem so that he can anticipate the break. Just a really textbook, technically sound man corner. And, biggest thing for him is just, like I said, the makeup speed. I think that, when the receiver does stack him, he really has to sell out to recover, and that can leave him vulnerable to comebacks. When he's in the hip pocket, he's generally pretty controlled, decelerating, but the speed just kind of can throw a wrench into things. And how to drop off in ball production this year, I think it is kind of a Azaria Thomas situation where when you get into his tape, there's a lot of like really just impressive press man reps where it's like he just didn't have as many opportunities to make plays on the ball, but that's obviously something that you would like to see.
It is very funny having a class where you have Darian Porter's got like 500 defensive snaps and Noah Williams has got like 3,000 all in the same class together. No, I think that it's really interesting thinking about someone like someone's got so few snaps. You saw Brugler had him. Brugler came out with his top 100 recently. He had him like in the 90s. That just tells me like, okay, he's betting on athletic traits, but he doesn't know really what he wants to do with him yet either. But no, like Porter has some really good flashes. I'll admit, I was like really disappointed when I saw where everyone else had Dorian Strong, and I was disappointed in myself when I saw that Strong at 11, because just watching him, he's a player who I think is going to be successful. Like he's just going to work. You know, and that's not really even based on ton of analysis. That's based on my gut, really. Just watching him, I think he's a player who just works in the NFL because of his football IQ. There are some physical limitations there, but he's just comparing him to someone like Mansour Delane across from him, who has all the physical traits in the world, but football IQ is not there. And going over and you really appreciate Dorian Strong, what he's able to do in coverage and be able to see and understand the field and spacing and leverage. So I'm a little unknown myself, honestly, that I have Dorian Strong lower than everyone else right now, but hopefully, man, it's just a really good cornerback class. I mean, what can I do about it?
It's interesting with Dorian Strong because when we were doing mid-season scouting reports, he was a lot lower than all four of you have him by, I'm going to say, close to 75 spots on the board. So this is like there was some group chatter about the Dorian Strong slander stops with this podcast today.
Really quick, just because once again, this is another player like James is showing me up because I was like, oh, I really like Jacob Parrish, and I think I'm going to be behind him, and then all of a sudden, like, oh no, I'm shitting on him compared to everyone else. Jacob, James, I'm sorry. Where do you have, if you were to like rank your nickel cornerbacks, where would you have Jacob Parrish at?
So, that really comes down to Jahdae Barron, who I think
say Jahdae plays nickel. Just for argument's sake, let's say Jahdae plays nickel.
Yeah, so I would have Jacob Parrish as the second nickel in this class, I think.
I love that.
I think with Jahdae Barron, it's really interesting because I feel like almost I just feel like his coverage role at Texas and what he was asked to do is almost unlike any other cornerback in this class. And like, I really like his tape kind of for what it is. I felt like his role was the lack of exposure it's kind of jarring compared to what other corners had to deal with, even corners that played in zone heavy schemes. I mean, like Jahdae Barron, I feel like his tape, you have to make less of a projection to imagine him moving to safety in the NFL than to imagine him playing cornerback in the NFL. Because he's, never playing press man, always has his back to the sideline, like doesn't even really have experience squaring up with a receiver and like having to keep his hips disciplined and stuff. It's kind of just, defending a lot of underneath routes within 10 yards, which he's great at. But it's just, I feel like he's almost playing a different position than most of these guys.
That's why I got Barron at 7. It's just like he doesn't. How many of those reps are truly translatable to an NFL defense on like a week-to-week basis as an outside corner? That's kind of where I view him. Like he's a defensive back and he's a really smart, intelligent football player. But even like looking back at his 2023 tape, I remember Isaiah Bond just like leaving him in the dust. And I asked him concerns about his speed and stuff. So I have Banner as a top 100 player, but I think I'm a little bit lower on him than where we're starting to see maybe some people in the media, especially getting like you see him appear in some first round mocks recently for some people. I just can't get to that point for him because there are so many limitations that again you haven't seen him play a traditional outside corner role. I really think you would see in the NFL.
So I was gonna just kind of like chime off that because I totally agree. And I think I'm kind of holding on to that like hope. When I was watching a lot of like trench players early on, you're watching Bama film, you're watching Texas film, you're watching Georgia film. So like watching a lot of these games that are kind of revolved around these three teams. And like every time I'm watching the Texas film, it feels like Johnny Barron's getting a pick. And it's like, man, this guy is like, he's like everywhere he needs to be. Then when I watch the film, a lot of the picks are just like, man, that was a shit pass. Like he was right place, right time, like good for him. But it wasn't a product of his coverage. It was like he was really fortunate to be in that spot. He made a point of the ball, good for him. But there are some things where I was like, I like kind of hoping to see a little more of him, being effective on that rather than just being a benefactor of the situation. And I think like
it's the difference between creating an interception and converting an interception.
Yeah, no, that 100% is it. And I think, as I think back on it and I reflect on it, it's like, I got Johnny Barron, like he is as low as a first round grade I can have on a cornerback. But, it's one of those things where if I do think he is a nickel only, he probably drops down a little bit. I think he's got some opportunities, but I definitely do see a lot of the things, Sam and James, that you guys are seeing with that.
So do you guys see Barron as a safety at all? Like I've heard the conversation between boundary and nickel. I haven't heard anything mentioned about Barron on this podcast about he might be a better safety. How do you guys see him? Owen, how about you?
I can see it just because I do like a lot of what he does when it comes, like we talked about how he isn't a traditional corner where he comes up, faces a guy, and is asked to play back towards the quarterback, read off this wide receiver, which I do think is where he struggles the most at, just because he's the most inexperienced. But he does show you is able to understand zones, process the routes in front of him. And while he isn't making he's not making great plays, like his ball skills definitely take a hit for me because he's not the one who's going up and making these kind of anticipatory jumps on balls. A lot of his interceptions are just him having great hand-eye coordination and working off the tip drill. So I do think he works best as a zone guy who can read it and process ahead of it, come down and attack. What you do like from like your safeties, we're going to be constantly for 20 plus yards back. You're going to be wanting to be able to read the defense or read the route combinations, analyze, and then attack the specific parts and be kind of that last level defender. I do think he's better when it comes to being a nickel defender because I do like him having that like 10 yards and in, being close to that line of scrimmage ability, because they also used him as a lot as like a dime linebacker at Texas. If you wanted to use him maybe as a robber, like a more typical strong safety that comes down to the box more often, I could see it. But I do think that if he isn't able to learn how to play without having his eyes on the quarterback and be more consistent as a regular boundary corner, safety could be the move. But I think as a zone nickel is probably his most comfortable position, at least right now coming out of college.
Anybody else have anything to add to that?
So, like, I'm just kind of reading through my notes I have on him, and like my negatives on him are struggles with his back pedal. He's a little high-waisted, not as smooth as I'd like to see him. He struggles flipping his hips when he gets the wide receiver past him. He can get grabby if he gets beat, and he might lack that long speed. All things, like if I look at those four things, it's like, man, if you're not an outside cornerback or if you're not like playing man coverage, like those things are then mitigated. You're probably not being asked to do that. The things that he excels at is he is like short. He has short area quickness. He's got good strength for the position and his frame. And he's got a great football IQ. And it's like, okay, well, if you take those things out of it and then put in, the positives that he has, it's like, yeah, you get him at the third safety on the field, maybe in a nickelback type situation, or just kind of like somewhere in that situation. I think that he excels. So, during this podcast, it's almost like talking me out of him as that outside cornerback and into that nickel or that safety role. But I definitely do see that.
Cool. So, Newt, you want to cover your next three? which would be
Yeah. So let's Amos, Castro, and then Tommy.
Castro, Hill, and you've got Zy Alexander right there too.
Do you want me to just hit those 4 then?
Yeah, hit those 4 because you're the only one that has Hill and Alexander, as best I can tell.
Yeah, no, I was kind of looking before and I saw it. So I won't touch much on Amos because Owen did a pretty good job of touching on him. For me, Trey Amos, I think I was talking about a month ago with Jim and Owen, and looking at the cornerback class, to me, there was like these first rounders or fringe first rounders, like where you'd say, okay, like maybe a top 32 pick. And then there was like pick 64 and on. Like I did not see a second round cornerback in my eyes. There was a lot of guys I was not sold on. And there were 3 guys that kind of converged to that for me. One was Azariah Thomas rising, which like he's continuing to rise, and he might like rise once again into that first round selection. And he's definitely flirting with that for me. I got him at pick 26 right now. So he's actually pretty much there. If I take a look at Savon Reveal, I'm looking at him kind of like dropping back a little bit. I'm not necessarily as high on him. Actually, I take it back. It looks like for like James, especially with where he's got him, he's number 4 on his board, but I think I've got him a little bit higher in terms of like my round grading. I've got him as a round 1 or 2 kind of buffer. So like I think he kind of like fits in there now. But Trey almost is the 3rd guy where I think he's like really slid pretty comfortably into that second round conversation for me. I like him a lot in terms of his size. With him being 6'1", I think he's got some decent length to him. I think it shows up really well on tape. He's constantly being disruptive at the catch point. If you've watched any of the Ole Miss film, he's going to be one that anytime that there's a catch, he is like, his hand is right there. He plays sticky in coverage. I really, really like him. One of the things that I'm not crazy about is I think he's faster than quick, meaning that he's going to end up on the ground a lot for me because he just doesn't have that short area burst. One of the things that showed up really evidently in the LSU game, where LSU's making a late drive to tie the game against Ole Miss, and Savon Reveal is like kind of losing track of these players when they're playing more of a prevent defense, because he doesn't have that ability to change direction quick enough. So that was a big deterrent for me, but I do like him. I've got Amos number 48 on my board overall. So he's kind of like really, really firmly in that second round category for me. But if I start taking a look at the guys that I do have, Castro, Porter, James did a great job talking about Porter. I agree with everything he said. But then Tommy Hill and Zy Alexander. So Castro is probably going to be my guy in this draft, and I know that like a couple of the other guys on here have him in their top 15. And if you look at Castro, you might not even put him in a cornerback ranking. You would call him a safety ranking. He's a nickel corner. He is like a Brian Branch type player where he's going to make his living at the slot and kind of like roam around from there. He's such a stellar run defender, where he is going to be a guy that's going to be effective in, that role alone, where if you're looking to play a nickel formation and just kind of like have that as your base defense, which with 11 personnel dominating NFL nowadays, that's not far-fetched. Sebastian Castro is going to be like a potentially starting cornerback, maybe not year 1, but year 2 for you, because he's so good in run defense. I think that when he gets paired up against wide receivers, big slot tight ends, whatever it may be, I really do like him in coverage. He's not the greatest cover corner in the world. That's why I think he's slot only. Like, you'll never see him outside. He's more apt to be a safety than an outside corner. But I think that he does well enough when he's asked to do those things in the slot coverage role, because I think he's got really good short area burst. I don't think he's got a ton of long speed, which is obviously one of the reasons I don't like him outside. I think he's quicker than fast. But everything that he does with the way he approaches this game is going to be, with a mentality of like, hey, I'm going to take advantage of every second of this next snap. He plays with an extremely high motor. He's a heavy hitter. And on top of that, when he has the opportunity to make a play in the ball, he does. I think if you got a chance to watch the Senior Bowl, I'm not saying that it was a pick, but like there were some instances where he was able to make a play on the ball there. I really, really do like him. A couple things to note also, does have a little bit of age concerns. He's an older prospect, being a 6-year player. He's going to be a little bit of a smaller player, once again, kind of being a slot or a box safety, kind of pigeonholed. But I really like him a lot. He's like touching that second round grade for me. He's number 63 overall on my board. So he's a player that he's probably going to be a little bit more of a my guy, but he's a guy that I've really enjoyed watching.
And then Tommy Hill.
Yeah, so Tommy Hill is kind of feels along the same vein. I think Tommy Hill kind of opens himself up to a little bit more. I actually like Tommy Hill for his slot corner to start with. Every time we come on, I swear to God, every time you podcast, everything you know about football, you just like your brain wipes away. Trent McDuffie, that's who I was like delaying time for. Trent McDuffie. If I think about him with the Chiefs and with their first Super Bowl in this like 3-peat attempt, which wasn't successful, but you think of Trent McDuffie playing the slot cornerback role. I think obviously him being a first-round cornerback selection was really ideal for that with the traits he brought. But I think Tommy Hill is kind of able to be like a poor man's Trent McDuffie with his ability to have some really, really good skills on the ball. I like his ability to make plays on the ball. His profile as a former wide receiver has shown up time and time again. He had a stellar pick 6 against Shedeur Sanders, where he just jumped the route completely, took it to the house, no problem at all. I think he's got a great frame at 6 feet, 205. I think that size shows up really, really well. He moves well enough, especially downhill, where I like him in that slot role, especially starting out, where he can be an effective third cornerback on the board. I think for him, everything's going to be technique, where he needs to improve his pass man. He needs to improve his hand placement. He needs to get a better feel for coverages and how NFL offenses are run. Everything for him just is like, hey, like work these technical things out. And I think you're actually going to be a really, really stellar NFL cornerback, and you have a legitimate chance at playing outside cornerback. I'm probably going to be a lot higher on him than consensus, but I think he's a guy that, like, with how thickly built he is and how well he moves and the skills that he has, the athleticism he has, he shows up really, really well for me. So Tommy Hill coming in at number 10 on my board. I've got him like as a solid third round pick. Okay. And then do you want me to talk about Zy Alexander or toss it over to Sam? I feel like I've been talking forever.
Yeah, why don't we toss it to Sam? So Sam, there's a question in the chat, and then after you answer the question in the chat, it looks like you're higher on Riley and Bryant than most of the other podcasters today. So
yeah. So I'll talk really quickly about some of the guys we're going to run through. So with Castro, I totally get all the reservations with him. I think there's definitely athletic concerns there. You go back and maybe take a look at some of the Ohio State games he's played over the years. Look at isolate him versus Dylan Noel, and you'll see the difference sometimes athletically. Now, Noel's had a really good pre-draft process overall. He's a really good player, so I think that's maybe not the best comparison for him. But I think the real value for Castro comes as a box add-on, essentially. Like having that guy down near the line of scrimmage where he can make an impact in the run game, which you don't get from a ton of players. He's older. He doesn't have the best size in the world. The arm like's a little bit more questionable. Doesn't have elite speed. There's a lot of things you can point to here. He's definitely one of the most unique players I have in the top 15 in terms of where he slots in compared to everyone else. Like him and Barron really don't fit in the normal molds I look for these guys. But I do think that Castro, a lot of it comes down to like football IQ and the use of leverage. And he actually makes some pretty clean transitions, I think. He does a good job anticipating routes. And a lot of it comes down to the experience element and how he's able to make those kind of instinctive plays. But most of it comes down to not really ball production, but more so making stops near the line of scrimmage, preventing yak, challenging for tackles for loss. He's a really I put down human torpedo coming downhill, essentially, which, again, depending on what you're looking for as a team, that varies in value. And with the age and some of the physical limitations, I can understand why some people might not have him as a top 100 player. And I totally get that. But for me, I'm just willing to put a little bit more value on that. It's really the only player I have like that on my board. But getting into some of the other guys from higher on, I've got Maxwell Harrison at 6, which I think is the highest one here. I never thought there'd be a day where I'd be the one who have to carry water for Maxwell Harrison, but here it is. So the way I would frame it is you took Maxwell Harrison's athleticism and combined it with Trey Amos's body, you would have a top 10 pick in the draft. And unfortunately, you don't have that. Both Amos, who has some of the physical deficiencies with the ability to play sticky coverage at the top of the stem, make those turns and grabs a little bit. And then you have Harrison, who's 5'11 and a quarter, 179, 31 and a half inch arms. It's not ideal, obviously, for a frame, but I getting to watch through his tape. What I really liked is the ability to quickly transition from like a back pedal to forward drive. It's instantaneous at times. He's really good at closing quickly and undercutting routes. I think he gets in phase really instantaneously at the line of scrimmage. And better than a lot of these guys, he doesn't really grab as much. There's just so much more clean movement than I was anticipating with him. And what I even saw, like going back to 2023, I didn't see as much of what I saw from this year. I think I like the athleticism a little bit more. I think he had a little bit more of a playmaker mode last year, but I like the athleticism a little bit more this year. It's tough because he doesn't have a ton of snaps. Like him and Porter, I think probably have the fewest snaps of any players on this board. So you're definitely dealing with a bit of a projection. But there are like the flashes of elite sticky man coverage at the top of the stem. There's flashes of anticipation. The click and close ability from him is really good and impressive to me. I think he's got good vision as well to process routes out of zone coverage. Really, I kind of like him more operating in zones than I do in man coverage because I don't think he's got a great jam. And I think playing him close to line scrimmage also opens up the potential to have plays run towards his side of the field because he's not useful in run defense. I just wouldn't put him there. I wouldn't really trust him in that area. He does tend to shy away from contact as well, especially in the run game. There's some inconsistent power behind his jams in man coverage. When you're putting him in press, he kind of whiffs with a two-handed jam. So there's development that has to occur there. Right now, I feel more comfortable operating him in a zone coverage where he doesn't have to play at the line of scrimmage. He can kind of use his eyes, his instincts to play downhill a little bit and make closing routes, kind of close down routes, challenge, maybe undercut routes as well. But I like his vision a lot. Somehow I ended up with him higher than everyone else, which again, like even looking at watching his tape last year, I wouldn't have anticipated being in the situation. But I do have him in the spot now where I could see him being a late 2 to a mid 3 is roughly where I have him on my board right now. Probably leaning more towards late 2, early 3. So I got him at 6. We've already talked about Jabari Barron, Trey Amos pretty consistently. We talked about Darren Porter is my 9, Castro is my 10. You want me to talk about Quincy Riley and Kobe Bryant real quick? Run through a little bit of them?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
So Kobe, obviously the injuries this year really derailed the season a bit. He clearly wasn't very healthy, and I think you go back and look at what he was in 2023, and you're really hoping he gets back to that form of the player. I still think we saw some of the moments this year, but I felt like a little bit of the athleticism was sapped this year in comparison to the past season. He's a bit of an older player. He's been around college football for quite a while. So I can understand there's some concerns where you look at his profile and say, well, this past year is not great. He's 5'10 and just a little under 5'10 and a half, 192, 31 3/8 inch arms. It's not really the physical profile you're looking for an older player. But I will say like the ball production in the past has been fantastic. And you saw a little bit always capable of when he's at the Senior Bowl. I thought he looked much healthier than what he had been during the season. And that's more the player that I'm kind of betting on. But because of the age and some of the concerns with what happened this past year, I'm still being a little hesitant with him. Got a 4th round grade on him right now. But you see there's willingness and aggression for him to play downhill. For some reason, it's all the smaller guys who are willing to actually come down and hit. Like guys like him, Upton Stout, they'll do it. But the guys who are 6'2", 6'3", maybe not so much. He will just destroy screens, attack downhill relentlessly. The ball tracking from him is really impressive. I feel like he dropped a couple of potential interceptions, but the ability to get one arm up there and stab it out of the air, poke it away, has really been good to me. He's very patient and poised to mirror releases with quick feet at the top of the stem to gear down really quickly and stay attached from operating in man coverage on those intermediate curls and comeback routes. Good job staying attached to shallow crossers as well, working over the middle of the field. I like his vision in zone coverages, although I think he can improve in this area. I still think there's some flashes there. We can see where he maybe makes a jump here and there to anticipate routes, but the anticipation still needs to improve a little bit more. I really liked some of the flashes we got from jamming at the line of scrimmage. I think he needs to get more consistent in this area in terms of placement and impact. But there were some really nice two-handed jams to kind of kill routes and reroute guys at the line of scrimmage. So I like those moments from him as well. Did a good job not biting on too many double moves. Like stutter goes, he always plays pretty well downfield. But some other stuff, maybe over the middle field, he could have improved on in terms of not getting caught too much in the wash. A lot of the concerns with them come down to just like the physical profile. And there are moments where I think like the burst is not elite, especially when he's beaten inside on slants and sometimes on posts. You don't see the elite recovery speed you're hoping for. And that can certainly open up to big yak moments over the middle of the field. Doesn't have the power to finish tackles consistently, despite the fact he plays downhill so much. And I do think there are moments where his eyes get stuck in the backfield in the quarterback, so he has lapses in coverage where he lets guys get behind him or kind of lets guys float around him, and he misses opportunities to make plays on the ball that way. And he will get burned every now and then trying to jump routes. But again, I'm someone who's willing to take chances in those kind of guys. I'm looking for the big play hunters. So those are really my concerns with him, mostly coming down to the physical size profile and the burst. But and he doesn't have the best range in zone coverage either, I think. So like that burst range speed combination is not fantastic, but I do like some of the flashes we've seen from him. For a 4th round pick, I think it's a quality selection, but I really wouldn't go as high as I think Dane Brugler had him like in the 70s. I don't know if I would go that high. And then Kobe Bryant, really quickly here. Some similar concerns for the speed, and the transitions are not the most fluid, doesn't have the best speed. You watch the Iowa State tape, and you kind of get an idea that he's just not the most elite athlete in the world. But I think he's got the mentality that you're kind of looking for in a quarterback in terms of the maybe barking a little bit and getting aggressive, but also the ball skills are really good. You've seen the ball production over the years. I think he's got nice instincts. He's another player who's willing to play downhill and make an impact. But going back to it, it's a little bit of that athletic concerns that I don't see an elite player. And I think that leads him getting burned downfield occasionally. He will get grabby. There's a lot of grabbiness. Even in the Shrine Bowl, you can see this. And I know it's the one-on-one, so who cares? But he gets grabby a lot. He plays through it. And he's fine with it, but I think that will lead to a lot of penalties in the NFL. He does have a really good quick click and close when playing an off man or playing a little bit off the line. He does have enough speed where he can play guys vertically. He's really good at identifying the ball and raking the receiver's hands at the catch point. You'll see he lays some really big hits coming downhill. I like his vision and awareness when working out cloud coverages. He's really good at reading his quarterback's eyes, and he will make those months where he will read the quarterback and jump off his route, come off his man, essentially, to make a play on a different area of the field. Yeah, he is willing to play run defense. He's a very slim guy. Like, he is Nate Wiggins slim, but a couple inches smaller, I think. But you really are dealing with a bit of an odd body type where he doesn't have – he's got better length than Wiggins did, but he doesn't have elite length per se, and he's a very thin frame to begin with. So I'm a little bit nervous about that. But, again, 4th round value, willing to buy in. I'm just not betting on him testing it out of the world to really make it for the fact that he's not this. Like Wiggins ran the way he did. You're fine with that. But Bryant's not going to run that fast. So I think there's going to be some more physical limitations with him in terms of fluidity and speed than you have with other guys who are maybe similar build profile-wise.
Sam, I was gonna bring up. I can't remember who said it, but like someone mentioned Emmanuel Forbes when talking about Kobe Bryant, and I think he hit the nail on the head. Like, one of the big differences that I see that I see, you see that weight profile, and I've got written down 175 for him. Obviously, the combine will be really big for taking a look at that. But like you said, like the mentality that he approaches the game with, you can't change that. And I think it's a really big thing for him. He's extremely aggressive when you talked about him coming off his coverage to come and, try to jump a route or, anticipate the quarterback where he's going to go. But then the other thing is his stellar run defense. One of the things that I take a look at is you look at his PFF scores from this year, and obviously not end all be all, but this guy is 175 and he had a 91.3 run defense grade. Like, that's stupid where that is in terms of like his size and his production in that. Obviously, he's playing at Kansas. There's a little bit of a difference there, but I think he hit the nail on the head, and I'm glad you said that really, really well, because I think that the size limitations he has, he does do a fair amount to make up with them by the way that he approaches and plays the game. But what is that going to look like at the pro level?
Yeah, well, I will say he is aggressive. Like, he fights to establish leverage with the guys. Like, he will fight you to get inside leverage when he needs it. And unlike Forbes, watching Forbes, a lot of his interceptions and a lot of his ball production were empty calories, like just convenient kind of things where he's not making the plays, just converting it.
Yep.
Like James.
Well, plays where he actually got beat.
Yeah. So I think that with Bryant, Bryant's a bit more willing to take risks, and sometimes it does backfire on him. But I think that the ball production that he actually has, there's more legitimacy to it than maybe what you've seen in the past from
I agree.
from like Rick Forbes.
Okay. Owen, do you want to cover Parrish, Hancock, and Burke?
Yeah. Do you want to do Parrish or me to do Muhammad?
Oh, yeah, Muhammad, Parrish, Hancock, Burke. That's right. You have
Gotcha.
4. Yep. Thank you.
So I'll just touch on Muhammad first. He was on my radar heading into the season. I'm a noted Washington Huskies fan, and last year was one of the best seasons I've experienced watching them. And he was their number one corner that year, playing on the boundary despite his size limitations. He played really well. So I had him on my radar coming into the season, and I watched his tape, and there was some stuff that once I actually, like, instead of watching as a fan, watching it, breaking it down in like the All-22 was something that I saw. I was like, okay, there's definitely some limitations here that I wasn't getting just watching, not from the zoomed out perspective when he was playing at Oregon, especially as their number 2 corner. And I was still holding out hope that maybe he could be an outside guy because I still had a relatively favorable look on him. And then he came in and measured in at 5'9", and I was like, all right, there goes that. So I kind of went back and retextualized what I was looking at with him as someone who's going to be exclusively like a slot kind of guy. And I still do like him as a player there. Despite his size, I do think he plays with some good aggressiveness, especially when it comes to contact within the within the routes, like at the top of the stem. He's not afraid to go and match up with guys who are bigger than him, like significantly so in some cases. Like I think he played against Pat Bryant in the first game of the season, and he was he didn't back down at all. He's not someone who will just accept the contact and get absolutely bullied off of that. So I do think I like that bit about him, and especially I do like how he's willing to stick his face mask in the run defense, which he's going to have to do a lot more when he's going to be in the slot. So I did see a lot of times he was good at shooting gaps, getting in there, even though he's not going to take on beaten tight end or offensive line blocks. He's going to be able to absorb some hits there, and if he's not being the guy to funnel stuff from outside in, being that boundary corner and relying on to get some extension, I don't hate him as a run defender there, despite his size. But looking at coverage, he's very twitchy. That's one of the things I do love about him transitioning inside to the slot is I do like his short air quickness and change of direction. His ability to carry more so horizontally across the field on drags and crossers I like more than when he was asked to carry some of those speedy receivers vertical downfield, which again I think is a lot of him being able to weave around that traffic towards the line of scrimmage and being able to use some of that more shifty and more quick and fast athleticism than his deep speed to carry guys in that kind of lower area. So I think his ball skills are exceptional for someone who doesn't have that much length. I do like his timing, his ability to come down and attack the catch point from off coverage. So I do think as someone who you're going to be asking to play and move inside the slot, Muhammad's going to be a guy that you're going to enjoy bringing in and having him transition there because he didn't really get tested that much at the college level with that, but you can definitely see some of the stuff that you want from your slot players while he's playing on the outside there. And kind of a similar story with that is with Parrish. Parrish was the last guy I got to on this list. I got a late start to the week on this position group, and cornerbacks also, personally for me, is the most difficult position to watch. It's one where I'm trying. It's kind of one where I have to take more time to sit down and watch guys. So with Parrish being the last one there, I haven't gotten through the film I would like to get through on him before we started this pod. But from what I saw, he's been steadily getting higher and higher grade for me. So I think by the end of it, he's probably going to be higher than a guy like Muhammad and be towards the top of that slot player for me. So as of right now, I'm relatively lower on him. But I do think I'll get better up because I do love, especially if you're going to be a guy who's undersized, listed at 5'10", probably a little shorter than that. But he has some good build on him. He's a little more thick and stocky than a guy like Muhammad is, who has more of a slender build. I think he plays, again, with that great physicality, is able to come up and attack runs, good to quick trigger, identify, and attack downhill. Love when he attacks screens on the boundary when he was playing on the boundary for Kansas State. I do think moving him more towards the inside with the slot stuff or slot positioning, I think he can do a good job of shooting the gaps there and attacking some more wide zone or sweep running plays there. So I do like him transitioning the slot. So when I get more deep into Parrish, I'm going to probably have him much higher than I do right now. But as of right now, I have him there. And then moving on to Hank.
Jumping in there real quick, just to let you know, because I'm going to put my fist in my computer if I forget to say this one more time. Parrish, from what I've heard, when he went in to begin training for the combine, he's running mid 4.4s when he first started out, which I thought he'd run slower than that. But if he's running mid 4.4s to begin with, you can probably get to like low 4.4s. Is probably what I'm expecting him to run at the combine, just so you know. Which is faster than I thought he would run, which is why I have him a little bit lower. I didn't really see it on tape, but just to give you a little context for how he's working out right now training.
That's awesome, and I think especially with the kind of the growth and the progression of guys who you like seeing, or the NFL offense are liking to use their bigger guys or some of their more speedsters in the slot where they're able to work in more space. You're going to want to see guys who have some of the more downfield speed. So if Parrish is able to run in the low 4.4s, that'll be really big for him, especially with the rest of the profile he's already shown with being willing to be physical with bigger guys, as well as being able to be more of that twitchy, short area quickness guys. And then if you can add that deep speed to it, I think that will definitely benefit him. For Hancock and Burke, go ahead, Newt.
So I was gonna piggyback off Sam, since he kind of like chimed in. I actually had a question, like Jabbar, I'm sorry, Muhammad. Do you have any concern? Like, so I see the same thing. Like, he slide him in the slot, he's going to be a lot more comfortable there. Do you have any concern with his ability to play the run at the slot if you have a team that's lining up in nickel coverage for like 75% of their snaps? Do you think he'll be a liability out there, or like how do you view him as a slot cornerback in run defense?
I think if you're playing against a team that runs a lot of spread and it still wants to try to attack you with the run, you can leave him out there and not feel totally like you're not going to hate it, because I do think he has that ability to kind of sense where the run's coming, shoot gaps, and attack it that way, and isn't afraid to stick his nose in and get some dirty tackles around the ankles. But if you're looking for a team against like Baltimore, and you're asking the guy who was a Bills fan, who we had that same question when it came to how are they going to defend the run against the Ravens, where you're in nickel 90% of the time. You have Teron Johnson, who's a strong run defender in the nickel, but he's undersized, and you have Baltimore's going to come out in these bigger sets, and you're going to wonder how he's going to come and attack. If you want Jabbar Muhammad on your run defense, and they're going to go against a team like Baltimore, who's going to ask him to come up and try to take on a tight end or like a bigger slot receiver like Rashad Bateman and get off and then make the play in the run game, you're not going to love that. He gets blocked up way too much. I felt like he got dominated at the block point. Where he excelled as a run defender was when he was able to work in space and shoot gaps. And I think that's going to be a lot more free when you're going against NFL level spread offenses, and he's going to be the slot guy there. When he was at Oregon, he was lined up outside. He was asked to be the outside contain guy and take on these wide receivers and blocks, and then try to use that and then get off. There was a play against, I think it was either the first or second Ohio State game, where they ran like a quarterback sweep to the outside, and he was it was like a lone single wide receiver out.
Ooh, Owen's cat got him.
Oh, man. Came after him like a spider monkey.
Yeah. So we'll let Owen set his stuff back up. Hey, James, you are high on Noel Williams and Jamari Harris. And interesting note, California is one of the two colleges that the Buffalo Bills have scouted the most. And I bet Noel Williams is the highest rated Cal prospect. So what do you have on Noel Williams and Jamari Harris?
So Noel Williams, incredibly productive career and season, led the FBS in interceptions, had, I think, 9 pass breakups. He's just a big, really physical press corner, can punch with one or two hands, really capable of mixing up his press techniques to keep receivers guessing and just slow down the release. I think just really in kind of every aspect of his game, he's an erratic player. The first weakness I have for him is that he plays with a completely random level of composure and technique from snap to snap. There will be times that he's really patient and technically sound, other times that it's just like chaotic footwork, jumpy at the line of scrimmage. So there are technical lapses that after 3,300 career snaps, it's hard to really project that to clean up too much. But I think just the pure physicality and ability to smother releases at the line of scrimmage, stay connected to short intermediate breaks once he latches on, and then has that extra length to kind of overlap and like cancel out a little bit of extra separation, extend, engulf quick slants and quick in breakers. So I like him in press in short areas. I think that he's a little bit stiff and will kind of get carved up by diamond release slants where you fake outside, cut inside, doesn't, gets back on his heels and lets receivers cross his face. I think that I thought his speed was pretty solid, but that'll go a long way towards finalizing his grade. I think if he runs in the 4.4s, he might have a chance to go on day 2. I have a 4th round grade on him personally. I think that a lot of similarities as a run defender. Like he's wired like a strong safety, just absolutely belligerent, crashing downhill and run support. But he is kind of a boom bust run defender, and I thought the contained discipline was spotty. But yeah, I see him as kind of a high volatility press cover 3, press man corner, somewhere on the Charvarius Ward to like Kyer Elam range, which is a wide range, but
that big ass range, man.
That style of player.
James, was he one of the more, I'll say, frustrating players to watch? Like for this, like for the purpose of this ranking and your cornerback ratings overall, it's one of the more frustrating players to watch because that's kind of why I walked away from him because like this guy could be a 3rd rounder, like a mid 3rd round player, but also he's so overreactive at the line of scrimmage and press opportunities that it's just tough to get, like tough to frame his level of inconsistency down to be able to accept that because he's gonna be a very, in my opinion, like a boomer bust player who might contribute more frequently and more often early in his career than a lot of guys on this list, but also be a guy who probably could get benched pretty easily for a team because of how inconsistent he is.
Yeah, and I would say definitely yes. And the other thing that I didn't even mention is, I mean, I thought his zone coverage, IQ and play recognition was just brutal. Like, really struggled to process just simple route concepts. Wouldn't squeeze routes properly in cover 3. Gave up so many just completely unobstructed chunk plays where like in zone coverage that, I mean, like not very few corners even at the college level are like getting beat with these kind of concepts. So yeah, I don't know. I've kind of talked myself out of him just by like reading his scouting report again. It's one of those things where it's like the report doesn't quite read like the grade. I mean, I don't know. There is kind of a drop off though, because I'm not really a big fan of like Denzel Burke and when you get down the list, but yeah, when I like redo my rankings, might give the nod to someone like Mac McWilliams from UCF. And then Jamari Harris is another older prospect, going to be 24.6 when he gets drafted. He is kind of like I think a hybrid. I like him in man coverage, and I really like him in cover 2. He reads high-low concepts at such a high level. Just love his instincts in zone coverage, the ability to generate turnovers, drives to the flat with authority. He's and then also really explosive, I think, click and close. He's got solid makeup speed, but I think that like size adjusted, he's 6 foot flat, 185. So not an elite athlete in terms of long speed, but he's comfortable getting his head around locating the ball. Didn't get called for a single penalty in 2024. He's also got some fluid hips, and he can transition, generate explosiveness out of breaks. The big thing with him in terms of coverage is that he's one of the worst corners that I've watched in this class so far at staying connected to stop routes and comebacks, especially when he's in cover 3. I mean, if you attack his blind spot, it's just automatic. Like I can't even remember him. I watched every game and I can't remember him like covering one properly. And then I think the other thing with him is that he's a really bad tackler in the flat, 23% missed tackle rate, a lot of ankle biting, a lot of shoestring tackles. He's also got, kind of a rocky injury and off-field history with like there's something with a gambling investigation that got him suspended, and then had another suspension for, I think, I don't remember the specific, something with like driving.
Operating something while intoxicated, I believe, was what I have down in my notes. So that's back in 2022.
And then had like, I know he missed the entire season of 2022 with an ankle injury, had a surgery. So he seems like the kind of player that could be off of some teams' boards, but man, like there's some really exciting aspects of Jamari Harris's tape from last year. And he was a guy that wasn't even on my radar, but I was just watching Iowa defense and I'm like, damn, I gotta lock in on 27. So yeah, I've been a fan of him for a while.
I had a 4th round grade on him, and I still do, but what made me really nervous was at the end of the season when he opted out after the UCLA game for the rest of the year. The coach came out and tried to defend his decision. He's like, oh, he's got to prep for the draft. But the way he defended it made Harris sound like he was held together by like pins and needles, essentially. Like, and I'm kind of like, because there's already like so much injury history with him to begin with that, like, if you're talking about this guy, maybe, going through a lot right now where he's still recovering from a lot as an older player who has had some off the field stuff in the past, that really does make me a little bit worried. Now, I don't have inside information, so I can't really judge him based off of that. He was a candidate to put in my top 15 because of all the reasons you mentioned. I think he plays leverage really well. And I think you nailed the evaluation, but I am a little bit nervous of some like the surrounding elements of his profile that I think drag him down a little bit.
And he's been kind of like every time I go through and adjust my grades, he's someone he started out really high, and then it's like I realized, he's almost 25 years old. Okay, let me bump him down a little bit. Oh, he's got this off the field thing. Oh, he's got the injury thing. It's like everything I learned about him kind of is lowering my grade. So yeah.
I was gonna say, like, because he was a guy I didn't have a chance to get film on, and I wasn't comfortable ranking. I was gonna ask like kind of those elements on the start of it, but man, you just like you start hitting like the age, the off field, the health things, and that it really like you think one of those things and it's okay, like you can get past that, but you start like stacking them on each other. It really does like kind of start to paint a broader picture of like, maybe he's like gonna be a solid prospect, but you have these ultimately all of these things behind you, and it's tough to get past.
Yeah, so totally. Owen, is the cat okay?
Yeah, so my cats specifically, when I record up here, I have a shared room. It's like my little space as well as the cats, and they're convinced that they are also podcasters. Whenever I tried to like record stuff for my old channel, or every week when I do the show, they'll jump up and they'll insist on being on my lap or on my desk because they know I'm speaking to the microphone, but they don't fully comprehend what it is. So they insist on being all over this, and so he jumped up on behind my computer here, and they got tangled up in my mic stand, which is on the shelf on my desk, and pulled everything down. So he's all right. He just ran away. I'm mad because he interrupted me because I was about to get digging at Newt because that Jabbar Muhammad play where he threw his wide receiver into his quarterback and stopped him on the goal line was against Mecca Buka. So I was going to get another dig at Newt.
Too bad your cat knew that it was a silly dig. So like your cat calmed you down there.
He did.
Well, why don't we pause for a quick minute? And Owen, you want to introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are and how they can find you?
Yeah, so everything I go through on the internet when it comes to content is going to be at Weekly Huddle. I have a YouTube channel. I stream these exact the Thursday shows to my channel as well, just to get extra eyes on it to help spread this little area around here. Everything else, I'll be on the Fridays every so often with the mock drafts. I know Newt, he did the one last week. I've been in the comments on all the other week's episodes. I know I popped in for a couple times this week when I was out sick. I had nothing else but to do, just sit back and listen to some great draft professor content. But other than that, in my non content production life, I'm a scout for the University of Buffalo football team. I work there however many hours a week now, on top of being a student and working a regular job and everything. So this is kind of my creative flex here. So that's where you can find me on Twitter over at Weekly Huddle, on YouTube, or as always, whenever I have time to, I'm on here with Jim and Newt on Thursdays, and we're just chop up about some NFL draft prospects.
Cool. And Newt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, no. So I've been here with Owen and Jim for like the past 3 months, and I was chatting with Jim before the show that like this has been a ton of fun for me. We've been talking offensive interior and defensive interior linemen, and then now like kind of spanning into a bunch of other stuff. Like you can find me at NFL Draft _Weston on Twitter, but a lot of the things that we've been talking about, like right here Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time, has been the biggest kind of like time that you can find like the thoughts that we have. Really enjoy the heck out of this. Owen has been an absolute blast, as much as like we give each other shit. Like I've never met Owen in person, and like I've really enjoyed podcasting with him. It's been a ton of fun. So like everything that Jim has done to kind of put really cool pairings together has been a ton of fun. So if you guys have been listening in, please, once again, like check out Draft Professor on YouTube, subscribe, follow NFL Draft Fanatic on Twitter. No, I in Fanatic. And then like a couple other shout outs. I have over the last couple of years, like really started to like dig into the 33rd team, which I know James does a fair amount with. Please give James a follow. He's been, really cool guy to kind of get to know on this, and all the things that the 33rd team does are, immaculate. And then I was talking to Sam before the show started. Before I was like actually like scouting and stuff, I was looking at big boards from NFL Draft Stock Exchange and with the first pick, ESPN ones, and Sam's was a board that I always check out. Sam runs a Substack, and it's wonderful. Like everything that he posts there is super great. I can vouch for it. Like I was saying to him, I've been checking it out for 3 years and kind of comparing that, and his content is wonderful. So if you guys get a chance, like check both of James and Sam out. If you're not already following them, please do, because the stuff that they're posting is absolutely wonderful. It's like, part of the reason that like I got to the point where I am today, looking at the 33rd team, looking at what Sam puts out, it made me kind of want to get a little bit more into some like draft podcasting and content coverage. So please check these guys out. Follow Owen at the Weekly Huddle. I know his takes can be crazy, but it's still worth listening to every now and then. And then like I said, everything that Jim and Draft Professor puts out, 6 days a week is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I definitely want to give James a shout out. So I'm a huge fan of 33rd Team, James. It's awesome to have you on the show. I've had conversations with 33rd Team offline about 12 months ago, and then I saw Steve at Mobile. I walked right up to Steve, and then Sam's there, but I didn't recognize Sam until I think he was wearing a hat or something. And then I'm literally standing right next to Kyle Krabs, but Kyle looks completely different if you're looking at him from the side than if he takes his hat off and you're looking at him straight like he is on his podcast. So I love the 33rd Team's content, but James, you want to introduce yourself? Tell everybody about the 33rd Team and everything that you do.
Yeah, James Foster. You can follow me on Twitter at NoFlagsFilm. And yeah, I'm a NFL and draft analyst for 33rd Team, write articles for them. Also during draft season, spend a lot of time working on my my big board web application that has scouting reports for last year. I think I got to like 250, so hoping to get to like 300 this year, but I got a lot of information there and pretty much learned how to code just by making that. So that occupies a lot of the extra football time that I spend this time of the year.
Cool. And Sam, like I said at the beginning, I think this is the third or fourth podcast you've been on. You've been a huge help, and I know we hung out in Mobile a little bit, but do you want to introduce yourself to any new viewer and let them know how they can find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Sam_Teets33, or you can just put Sam Teets into Google. I'll basically be the only thing that pops up. It's like me and an Italian mobster from like the 1900s, so it's going to be pretty easy to find me overall. I do run a Substack account. Substack is a free application. It's basically a newsletter. I try to put it out 5 days a week. I've slipped up a little bit recently because work, my full-time job's been really dragging me down a little bit, but it's all fun stuff, but it's been taking a lot of time. So I would say, you can go to substack.com or you just search up Sports Talk with Sam Teets. It should pop up. It's a free application. You can either follow it or you can subscribe with your email account to get the emails directly to you. It's all free, and it's 4 or 5 days a week. We'll be getting draft content, draft reports for this year. I've already got a decent number ready to go for next year. So getting ready to gear up, and there'll also be more big board updates, more mock drafts as we get closer to the actual draft itself.
I also need to shout out Sam with if you go over, and also I guess James with the 33rd Team at the NFL Scouting Podcast, Locked On with Kyle Krabs, as Jim was saying, 33rd Team Zone. Sam if you'll catch him on Fridays with some of the hottest takes because they do their mailbag episodes, and I kept hearing Sam's name, and I ended up following him on Twitter and stuff through that. So I know Jim, you're starting to get in on it too, but those are always fun because Sam comes with the heat there. So he always has.
I've got Joe's tweet tagged right now. I'm waiting. I'm trying to think of something that I put in for tomorrow's show, but I haven't thought of anything yet. So I'm puzzling about it. I mean, I'd probably sit there for like an hour after the show ends and think about what I got sent to Joe for tomorrow.
I have a notepad with all my takes that come up throughout the week and just like have them ready to go and fire in there. I didn't even know he tweeted it out yet.
That's smart. I should probably do that.
Sam, that was a perfect segue because actually Kyle took one of my questions last week, and I'm going to put it to you guys. So the average number of corners taken in the first 3 rounds is 12. I'm looking at Draft Tech right now. So this year, what is your over-under? And the number is 9.5.
Oh, 9.5.
9.5 corners taken on day 1 and 2. Are you taking the over or the under?
So Jim, I'm kind of laughing because I look at, I'm running it on my board. And Dorian Strong is number 12 for me. He's number 98 on my board. It's like, shit. Like that's you're cutting it close.
I'm saying the over under is 9.5. So if you have 12
that's what I'm saying. I'm gonna stick to my board and I'm gonna say over.
So Sam, what do you think?
I have 10. I've got 10 with I would go probably over because I don't have I've got fourths on guys like Quincy Riley, Jacob Parrish, Kobe Bryant. But I've got thirds on guys who I don't think will probably go third round. I think there's a chance Castro ends up in the 4th. Swap guys around. I still think we probably get to 10 or 11.
Owen, how about you?
I definitely think we can get the over. I think with enough of the guys we talked about here, especially with how we have a ton of guys at the top who have injury concerns that you're going to be a little worried about taking them high up. There's going to be a run when it comes to day 2, especially if not enough guys going the top of the round. Yeah. So I could see a high concentration of them on day 2. Specifically, you might even hit that number specifically on day 2 because you have guys who are either super highly talented, like we got with I've been blanking on the Iowa State kid's name that we talked about. We have Porter. You have guys like him who have super high upside when it comes to athleticism, but have low tape or low floor, and you also have guys who have good tape but have a bunch of injury concerns that you might be able to concentrate that all in day 2. So I do think we get the over, but probably not much by I think if you're saying it at 9.5, like 10 or 11.
Yeah. So James, how about you? 9.5 corners taken on day 1 and 2. You taking the under or the over?
Yeah, I'll take the over. I think you mentioned the injury thing, like with Ben Morrison, and that's a big part of why I have him at cornerback 10 is because of it's just like a cornerback with a hip injury is kind of like the worst possible thing. So that scares me off a lot. So I think there's a chance he falls, but with Jacob Parrish, like if Parrish as a 21-year-old, if he runs, in the 4.4s, which I didn't see on tape, I think that would pretty much guarantee he goes on day 2. Kobe Bryant, I've heard, I know NFL teams, a lot of them have day 2 grades on Kobe Bryant, and I think he's a player that the NFL is a lot higher on than the media. And me, so yeah, I think Bryant and Parrish would set them over the top there.
Okay. So keeping in mind that if I'm giving the over-under at 9.5 and the average is 12, there's at least 4 of the top 12 corners have injury concerns between Ravel, Morrison, Hairston, and Johnson, right?
Yeah.
So 4 of the top 12, and that's actually probably closer to 4 of the top 7 have injury concerns. So, if your team needs a corner, go sign a free agent. That's my advice. So,
Generally good advice.
Yeah. So I want to make just a couple of channel announcements. So I think there's going to be a 32 GM mock draft tomorrow for all those listening, but I have to drive to Washington, D.C. tomorrow. So I am not going to post anything about the 32 GM mock draft until I'm actually at my hotel. Next week, we've got full docket of podcasts, Monday through Thursday, 2 podcasts each day, 32 GM mock draft on Friday, and then we will also start having 32 GM mock drafts on Saturdays and Sundays starting in March. And I know, Sam, I think you and I have already talked about you hosting one of the ones that's in March. So,
yep, I'll do one on the March 8th. We just got to figure out a time.
Yep. And you can tell me the time. So,
okay.
But yeah. So the channel has daily draft content. So there are people like Newt and Owen that are podcasting every day. There are 37 podcasters at the Draft Professor. And some podcast once a week, some podcast like this is Sam's 3rd time. And then we have guests like James come on as well to help us out. So I appreciate all 4 of you. Without your contributions, the channel really doesn't exist. So you guys are truly appreciated by me. So thank you very much. So we've been going for almost 2 hours. So on behalf of the 37 podcasters at the Draft Professor, for Sam, James, Newt, Owen, myself, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow. Thank you for watching this episode of Mrs. R Relevant, the Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. Please follow the Draft Professor on X at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic. Please follow the Draft Professor channel on YouTube at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic. We look forward to seeing you on our podcast tomorrow.